Welcome to Stampscaping 101. We have a quarter page gold foil paper here. Three different colors of Brilliance inks. The Brilliance inks are the only type of, I don't know, inks that I know that will dry on here besides something like a Staz-On, okay? Staz-On will dry on here, but it has its kind of own look to it. The Brilliance inks will dry, albeit very slowly, okay? It might even take a week or 2 weeks for it to dry. This is one of those cards that's really kind of fun to put together, but it's not one of those ones that you'll want to utilize in terms of a process, for a card that you're going to need very quickly. There's other types of things that you can do, though. You can do things like emboss on this type of paper. Just be aware of the types of embossing powders you're going to be using on there, and to do a little bit of experimenting around with how the different colors of embossing powders or inks you'll use on here look like on top of such a reflective type of surface here. Okay? Alright, so anyways, we're going to use Nature's Set number 6, and I just did a preliminary scene testing out some of these different processes on here, and I think I have it down. I'll show you how fast this card can come together if you kind of know what you're doing, which I didn't with my first preliminary test here. Okay, now this is a type of surface where you can just stamp on here with black ink, and it looks very dramatic, but what I think looks even better, just to take the process one step further, is to do some preliminary lighting on here. Okay, now this is a very reflective type of surface, and it reflects as much light as you put on it, okay? It can look very dark like that, if you have it, reflecting something very dark, or it can reflect as much light as it, possible in terms of kind of shining right into it. It's like a mirror, okay? So what I'm going to do in this scene is I'm going to stamp out the lakeside cabin and a ledge right down here. We're going to add one stamp into the mix in the form of this lady writer right here. I want her to be kind of looking over this scene and the setting, and as far as kind of the thematic content of this. But where the cabin is going to go and where the reflection in the water is going to go, I'm going to add that first, because if I stamp all my images first and then try to light over the top of it, it's not going to work, because this is going to be sopping wet still. It'll still be wet 2 days from now, 3 days from now. Depends where you are. The more arid you are, kind of the drier the faster it can dry, but I wouldn't, count on it drying fast in most cases, okay? All right, so my cabin is going to go roughly about right here, and what I want is for that cabin rooftop to be kind of light. You don't have to know exactly where everything is going to go. If you just kind of give it a general type of application of this medium here. Here I have a little bit of wet ink on this still, so I'll kind of get this on my, this is the cling foam version. Just as long as you generally know where it's going to go, roughly about right there, okay, you can get that lighting in there. With this type of process, you don't have to be exact at all, okay? Now, one of the things I like to do is I like to give kind of some shimmering light on the water's surface, so I'm just going to have it right down here, okay? This is a 100% cotton ball, and I'm just going to do this right here. You know how you kind of look across a body of water and it has that kind of that light shining off the surface? Okay, now I'm going to put this ledge right down here as well, so I'm going to give it a little bit of lighting as well, or a lot of lighting. So it looks something like that, all right? And like I said, you don't have to be exact on it at all, okay? I think it looks pretty good, with whatever you have down there. Once you get all those images stamped over the top of it, it's going to look weird because we don't know what that is, okay? Now, if you've seen any of my latest scenes, I do like utilizing this kind of paper towel cloud type of template approach to the formulation of some cloud texturing, okay? So I'm just going to lay some of this down here. Okay, now a lot of you mention, hey, you make it look so easy. Okay, the thing that makes my processes, all of them, easy is I don't go with a, I don't try to get everything down instantly, okay, like brush calligraphy or something like that, okay? Everything is kind of utilizing kind of a drier application of things, or I use a range of it, okay? Now I haven't re-inked this yet, okay, so I added, when this was really wet with my thick, style of white pigment ink, I'm tapping it lightly at first, okay? And I'm spreading it around. I'm not trying to do everything. I'm not trying to get all of this like this, okay? I just work one little thing at a time, okay? So that I can get a range of it going from lighter, to a little bit darker like this, okay? Because, I'm kind of tapering it out like this, okay? So when you utilize kind of a lighter touch and a drier application of media, be it white on gold or, dye-based dark on white cardstock or whatever, I utilize the drier versions of it, okay? And when you do that, you don't get this big, huge slathering or application of ink at any given time, so it becomes much less precarious. And I think that's what people mean by making something look easy. I don't use any precarious methodology. It's all really, user-friendly. It's when people try to go too fast that you run into potential problems if you try to add something too quick. Otherwise, you can get a big slathering of ink like this, and this is where people get a little bit skittish about any types of process, okay? They go like this and they think, why is it not working, okay? It's just, it doesn't look like that, okay? So, the thing about gold foil is it's also one of the most user-friendly surfaces possible, okay? What other type of surface can you just buff everything out and it's good to go, right? So, one of the things that makes this a little bit, kind of more particular in terms of your processes also makes it the most user-friendly, in my opinion. Because you can just wipe it all off. Things don't dry on it very fast. Well, utilize that, okay? If I stamp out all my images on there, I don't like it, or I smear it or something like that, just wipe it all off, buff it all off, and start again, okay? All right, so this is a Brilliance black right here. We have our lakeside cabin. I'm going to roughly try to get that cabin right here. I'll put my finger on it right there, into that light area, okay? You don't have to be exact in terms of your, positioning of it. Now, if I gave it just a tiny little white area, then, I might want to be a little bit more careful about it, but it was just, a quarter-sized, I don't know, like ball application of that white ink. Okay, now you have to be careful about your impressions here. When you're using these inks like this, it's a thick, almost like paint, and it is oil-based, so it's slick. So when you're adding that on top of the gold foil, it's fine, but when you're adding it on top of a layer of oil-based pigment ink that's, somewhat, thick as it is, you just have to be careful that when you press down like that, you don't kind of skew it like that, because it's easy to do. So you just kind of have to get used to it, okay? So see that? See how that cabin's in the light like that? We have a little window in the light. See, this is the color it would be right in here if I didn't put that little white down. So it's just a little, it's an easy application, right? Just to put a little white paint down there, and, some of that white went out in here, but that's fine. It's behind the trees or whatnot. Even if it wasn't, it's still fine. Okay, so this is my little lighting right here. And let's see, I could stamp my ledge in the foreground right now, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try this process right here that I found when doing this a few minutes ago. Or I don't know, maybe it's been a half an hour. And let's take the water pattern out of that nature set number 6, and let's try that in gold ink, okay? With Stampscape stamps, you can use partials too. I think this is going to be a little bit too much for what I want, so I'm going to wipe off some ink like this, okay? So I just kind of went a little streak like that here and here, so I have these little streaks of gold ink in here, or on here, okay? And I'm just going to stamp that right in here. So you see, it kind of goes along with that spirit of using a little bit less, like a little bit, drier application of white ink. And I'm using a smaller application of the water pattern, okay? And it's not in black, although you could do it in black, but look at this gold right in here now, okay? It has a little kind of iridescent, see that quality to it? And that's shining right in here. It's hard to see because it's embedded in white like that, but we're going to build some texturing like that, okay? So that was just some streaks in here, so you're using partials, and it wasn't super juicy. I probably should re-ink this gold pad. By the way, I could have stamped that cabin in gold too, right over the top of that, and it would look like it was kind of farther off in the distance because it was lighter. Okay, so that was the gold. Now let's go in this with white, okay? So we have the white in terms of this, but let's get some of this imagery in here too, in white, okay? Wiping off some of it like so, all right? Just so it's not so extreme. And let's get some of that. And let's go right in here, like so. You can try for, a few impressions of it maybe. Like that. See? You get those little reflections like that. It's kind of reflecting some light. Okay? If you don't like some of it, it's a little bit too much here. What I can do is I can just wipe a little bit of it off. There we have it, so I just took a little bit off with this. You can take it off with a little Q-tip if you want to, or you can kind of spread it around like this. So the thing that makes this kind of a somewhat peculiar surface to stamp on with that low or slow drying requirement also makes it, I don't know, one of the most user-friendly surfaces in terms of revision, I guess. Okay, let's go with this graphite black. Let's go with this ledge stamp. This is where you gotta have to be kind of aware. Anytime you're making your impressions with it, when you get real comfortable with stamping kind of this ink on top of such a slick surface that already especially has some ink down here, you tend to get a little bit more comfortable and kind of be aware. And it's right in here when you're going down like this. I can feel like it. If I'm not careful, when I'm stamping it down, I can kind of feel it move a little bit, okay? Not this time, but if I'm not being careful about it, or just aware. I mean, it's not a precarious type of process, and it might be even easier, let's say if you're doing it on a platform, then you just go down like that. It's not going to go anywhere, but just make sure that your paper is kind of set and won't move on you. Okay, so here's that rock. See how that rock is in the lighting right here? I have a little bit of that. I stamped it into some of that water reflection in there, so it's showing through right there, but no big deal. Okay, but there's the ledge. By the way, this is the quarter page piece, card, whatnot. Okay, let me get that little smear there. Kind of blend it out a little bit. I am kind of probably smearing a little bit of that black ink, but who cares? Let me just get that little white reflection kind of blended out. There we go there. No problem. Let's stamp out our figure here, okay? This figure doesn't come in clean. My individual stamps are only in unmounted, but I'm using a little bit of tack and peel here on my acrylic block. Okay. Lady Writer Large, I think it's called. Okay. Just making sure I have enough ink on there. Okay. I'm going to wipe off the bottom a little bit, the feet, okay, because I do have it kind of like where the feet are like standing in grass, but this is like bare rock here, so I'm going to position this righter about right, like so, on the rock. Oops, I might have moved it a little bit. I hope I didn't move it too much. She's fine. All right, so there, right there. Okay. All right. Now, let's go for our final impressions. Let's go for the pine tree that comes in the set. And what block am I going to use this with? I guess it's this one. I can't remember if this is my block for this size. I need a little bit more of a narrow acrylic block someday. Okay. I'm just squishing this down on the surface right here because this has some the black pigmenting from my preliminary run through of this scene here. There's certain things, you know, I've done this process on other scenes, but there's other things that I didn't really try, like in terms of the reflection and just minor little tweaks that I haven't tried before. So a lot of times when I do these scenes, there's something in them that I'm doing really for the first time ever. Okay, so do different sized trees come with Nature Set 6? No, but you can just stamp a smaller version of it and it looks like a shorter tree, right? If I stamp it down like that, it looks like a tiny tree right there, okay? That's the fun thing about scenic stamping. You use whatever portion of the stamp you want, okay? You can always be going off the page or whatnot, okay? Things don't always have to be the full image on the scene. So when you look at a grouping of trees like that, people will wonder, is that one stamp? Well, no, it's the same stamp, just stamped 3 times on that side, okay? All right, so those are the impressions right there, and I think that makes for a pretty dramatic looking card. But let's do a little bit of tweaking on here, and in a very fun way. This is what I really like to do. I love adding details into my scene. And I think that it kind of, the smallest things sometime can add, can have a large visual result, okay? Now, I know a lot of you have purchased a white paint pen because a lot of people ask, hey, what's that pen that you're using in those scenes? And I looked and it was like sold out on Amazon. And I don't blame you because these pens sure come in handy, be it doing lettering on a card or just some texturing or whatnot. Little effects with this come in handy, and in scene stamping they work great as specular light, little flashes of light, reflections, stars, sparkles in the water surface like that, okay? Now, like I said, I think this looks fine as is in terms of a finished piece, but let's add this, and I'll show you just how much contrast this pen can add to a scene. Okay, so I'm just adding these little sparkling little flashes of light. They call it specular light. I'm turning my card in a direction where I can access this area because I can't put my hand over anything. It's just too wet. Okay, so this is white, so the highlights are going to be in the lightest of areas, right? They're not going to be out here unless they represent something else, like it's dark up there. This could be a nighttime type of scene. Okay, so see that little lighting in there? Doesn't that make it kind of dance and glow like that? Okay, see that window right there? The window in the cabin is as light as the roof, right? But in a scene like this, why not make the interior of the cabin a little bit lighter? It changes the emotional tone of the object, I believe, in terms of a structure like that, okay? So I'm adding that lighting right into the cabin, okay? See that right there? Look at that. In terms of a finished piece, doesn't it have a different feel to that object like that? It really makes this kind of visual dialogue between the writer and the cabin. The writer is now probably looking into the window more specifically than to the cabin in general now. Okay, but this is water down here, right? So in the design itself, what I've drawn into the design, I've given us a little kind of a head start in terms of potential little lit areas. So underneath that cabin in the water, I've made that little reflected light. See that? How it's reflecting that light? And do you see these rocks around here? Do you see how they're lighter on the top of them? So I've given you a head start in the event that you want to do lighting in your scene. So just on the tops of some of these rocks right here, I'll put a little dot or two, okay? So that now those rocks in there are reflecting some light, and there's these little ripples down here in the design too. You can put some little lighting like that. So you get this visual dialogue of light and reflected light down here. And I don't know, light, now this sparkling area down here isn't supposed to be light coming from the cabin. It's probably from, you know, a moon or whatever above. Okay, so I think by adding that kind of that light in the cabin, I think we're saying that it's probably a, you know, at least a sunset or twilight type of scene, much less could be night. So see this area up here where I've retained some open area that, you know, isn't cloud filled. You can put a few little like stars up here. And isn't this kind of a nice kind of connection with the surface? You have sky up here that has these little dots, but then you have it on the surface down here. So from a textural standpoint, we've created continuity by having a similar little texture up here in the sky as down here, okay? And I could put little highlights on these trees here too. I'm not going to do that. I think this looks good just as is. You know, just with it kind of being in the water like that. It kind of brings more attention to the water like that. But like I said, it wouldn't look bad having a few little sparkles on some trees like this, reflecting some of that light and whatnot. But overall, you know, a pretty quick scene to do. Would this take about 20 minutes or so? I'm at the 22-minute mark right here. You know, I was kind of blabbing away explaining some things, but these can come together really fast. You know, when you're doing that preliminary white lighting in the background first. And believe me, it doesn't have to be exact or anything like that. Now, one of the things that you'll find when you're doing this type of thing, when you're kind of getting used to, if you're working on foil, you can do this on other types of things like Star Dream, okay, and it's not going to be so kind of precarious. The images will already be kind of set up and things like that. You can touch them. But on the mirror, you know, the most kind of, you know, precarious one, relatively speaking, I didn't have any trouble with this, but what will happen is sometimes you'll touch, you know, an area like that, or you'll smear a little bit of an area or whatnot, but if it's like in the white area like that, and you remove some, just go back in and just tap right over it. If you do that, be careful that you're not tapping over some of that black right in there, because it's going to be very wet, okay, and it can smear. If you end up getting a big smear or something like that, oops, you know, I don't know, just wipe it off. You can kind of buff it off and it should come off. Now, if you're in Arizona where everything's like, you know, it's very arid and things are setting up, you know, 5 times as fast, you're going to have to play around with it and kind of see what type of time frame you have to adjust your scenes, or to do a complete removal of an area or the whole thing, you know. So, I don't know. It just depends where you're at. And it also depends on how much ink you had on your pads, too, about how much you've applied. Maybe the more ink that you've applied, maybe the longer you have to wipe it off, because it's going to take longer to dry, because there's, you know, more ink was applied like that. So play around with it. Foils are a lot of fun, and they're super dynamic surfaces in terms of the end result, you know, just because of that sheer reflective type of quality. These are very hard to photograph if you're sharing it with social media or whatnot. But what I do is I take a little video and I go, you know, something like this, so people can get the gist of it. When you're doing a still photograph, like if I did it like that, with my camera. Here I am in the photo, you know what I mean? So, I don't know, these are one of the most dynamic surfaces in terms of they're reflecting whatever's in there too. So, here's my, studio lights on both sides and whatnot. There I am. It's kind of interesting with the red on there, huh? But I don't know. It's fun stuff, and I don't know. I recommend that if you do like these types of pieces in any way, I recommend you trying them. And they're not just for scenes, of course, stamping out things like word stamps on them, or just anything, occasional types of imagery or whatnot. That would be good too. I don't think these are really good to stamp on and then color in, but I don't know. There's probably some sort of methodology we can figure out in which we can apply kind of specific little areas of color, but I haven't figured that one out yet. Alcohol pens maybe, but what inks to use, might require embossing or something like that, and then coloring in with alcohol inks on. Maybe the silver would be more kind of a neutral platform to do that on, but I don't know, all kinds of different possibilities, and they yield some pretty dynamic end results. Hope you enjoyed the scene. If you have any questions, drop me a note in the comment section, or if you've tried this out and you have any tips for me or anyone in terms of the utilization of this type of surface, please write it into the comment section, because we're all, I'm still learning from it, as most people that I know, in terms of utilizing this type of surface right here. So I don't know, a lot of area to learn, and that makes it kind of really especially fun too. It's like the undiscovered, I don't know, whatever, crafting terrain, you might say. Okay, anyways, thanks for watching.